everyone. Welcome to our session on building data-driven culture. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to talk about how we partner with US Cellular to build an analytics program to support their ever-changing digital channel. My name is Alex Clemens, and I'm a Vice President of Analysis and Insights here at Merkle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gina Cianciolo, and I am the Manager of Digital Analytics and Performance at US Cellular. Like Alex had mentioned, we have been transforming the digital channel over the last couple years, and we're able to do this by having strong leadership with a clear vision of what we should all be focusing on. By having this clear vision, we're able to have clear goals from our leaders so that we're able to transform our work and have a strong customer experience with that is simple and compelling to customers.
So once the team has, the clear goals, and those goals are handed down from leadership, the first step at building, your analytics practice, your culture here, is to align on KPIs. And so it's not just setting up dashboards and you're done. There's a whole bunch that we actually have to do to get there. And so this pyramid that you're looking at here is basically the path that we start to take here. So we start with alignment on KPIs. And this is really making sure these ladder up into those overarching goals, and that they make sense to actually measure those goals as well. On top of just your baseline KPIs, you're also going to have your primary KPIs, secondary KPIs. So if your overall transactions or your transaction rate starts to change as a primary KPI, what are the things you're going to start to look at as a second level to understand what's going on there? On top of that, your segmentation, your dimensions, all those other things that are going to let us unpack those KPIs when they change to really start to drive our analysis. The other thing that this starts to do is this sets the stage for down the road how we're going to handle our analysis programs, right? The KPIs, the segmentations, all those things are going to start to let us know what questions can we answer from our data. And that's going to let us start to think through, okay, what deliverables are we going to have to give here? And that lets us make sure that we have the right data to actually answer the questions that we need to answer. From there, it's around targets, baselines, benchmarks, and making sure that everybody within the team knows where we stand and where we're trying to get to. So the baselines, the benchmarks, some of those are going to be internal to US Cellular, others are going to be externally found, but making sure that every primary KPI that we have, we know where we're sitting, and then each one having a target or a goal of where we're ultimately trying to get towards. That target could be within the overall calendar year, that could be with an individual project, but everything that we're doing, we're trying to lay out a goal and then go and attack that goal. That leads us into our data collection design. And so this piece is really around where is the data coming from. In some parts here, quite a lot of our data comes out of Google Analytics, but we also are pulling data from other data sources, other sources of truth throughout the organization. This has actually helped transform our program quite a bit when we're pulling data from more than just one tool, especially when you start to go across groups within the organization. We see that not everybody is going to want a Google Analytics as your source of truth, because everybody's going to have different systems that they're working with. So we pulled in data from multiple systems to help design the program, and that's been really, really key for us. That then all leads its way up into the actual insights program. And you can't get to that program, like I was mentioning before, without doing this, because this is the foundation for everything. And so without this, you don't have that alignment across the org that you need in order to kind of move into the next steps here. So what does this program ultimately look like is what we've got here. So it starts with this rainbow over top of everything. And this is really, the rainbow is really around everything that you do within the program on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to keep it moving and to keep it healthy. So it starts with the audience on the left-hand side. So audience is really going to be in two separate ways. The first way is going to be around your internal audiences, where the data is going, who needs what, where, and when, how they need to consume that data, what level of granularity that they need. Understanding that is going to be really important for just happy customers throughout the organization. The other side of this is going to be your site or your campaign audiences. And so for USL, that's going to be prepaid customers, postpaid customers, new customers, existing customers, certain geos or other places like that. But this is really your the audience within the site, and breaking down and understanding what those different audiences are ultimately doing. I talked about KPI alignment on the last slide, but this is so important, especially when you start to get into launching projects. We don't want to be We don't want to be launching projects and then figuring out how we're going to optimize them or how we're going to measure them down, after it's launched. It's always important to get this done up front. So we do quite a bit of that within the organization. Tagging, taxonomy, this is the data collection. It's garbage in, garbage out. And really, we live and die by this data, the taxonomy within this data. So making sure that it's clean, it's easy for us to use, it makes sense for us. And there's constantly an optimization within that as the organization changes, as new things launch, as new tools come online, all kinds of things like that. Governance over top of all this, making sure that 2, 3, 4 years down the road that USL still has the same fidelity of data and fidelity of data collection that they have today, that they will have in the future, and that really allows for the longevity of this program over time. Center of Excellence, that's really the governing body over across of all this. That's Gina and her team. Training piece is going to be very important for us. Gina is going to talk a little bit more about this as we go. But really, we don't want, when we're building a program, all the keys to the program to sit on one side, of the relationship. So we really look at this as a partnership between Merkle and US Cellular. And so making sure that we're elevating, their team and so that they can come in and help, do analysis or help, contribute to the program here, because the good ideas that we're going to get for our testing and optimization program are going to come from the entirety of the the organization, both us as well as USL. Learning libraries, insight, socialization. This is also kind of the last piece of the rainbow, but arguably potentially the most important piece is if people don't know what we're learning and they don't know where to find what we're learning and what it means, the whole thing is kind of meaningless. So making sure that we are finding those insights, that nugget of information in the data, but then also making sure that the right teams know what that means and what they can do with that is critically important. Under the rainbow sits our data, right? And so left to right on this, Google Analytics, Google BigQuery, this is the foundation of what we're doing every single day. Google Analytics is our day-to-day source of truth for what's going on within, the sites and the apps. It's how we're looking at, behavioral measurement, all kinds of things like that. Content Square, we're using quite a bit around, experience optimization. That is really key for that. So it's not a primary, source of reporting, but we use it to kind of decorate our analysis, especially with it quite a bit. I mentioned before having data from more than just one tool, so internal sources of data out of US Cellular. There's quite a bit that's coming from there, and then Tableau and Data Studio or Looker Studio for data visualization, depending on the need, depending on the audience, depending on the data. We'll pick a tool, for how we're going to visualize out that data here. And then in the center of the rainbow is your actual deliverables. And so when we think about deliverables, we want to think about it in this 2-axis chart of from shallow to deep, how deep does your insights need to go, and then from narrow to broad, how on the narrow side, are you looking at just one page or just one campaign? On the broad side, are you looking at an entire site, an entire section, entire app? And so when we start to think about that 2-axis chart, it helps us lay out those deliverables. And when we tie that back to our KPI alignment that we talked about in our measurement framework layout, that lets us figure out, some of the questions that we're going to answer. And as we're thinking about the questions that we're going to answer, we start to plot them out in this chart here. So on the shallow and broad side, you're going to have your dashboards, right? And these are going to be your daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, but it's just set it, forget it, automated dashboards that the team can go and access, at any point in time. On your narrow and deep, these are our monthly, analysis that we've got on the site, our promo analysis, anything like that that's, cadence, campaign reporting, other things like that. And the final piece of this whole puzzle is, when we want to get deep into data, and we're going to look, across potentially a larger, swath of the site. And this is what we call our serial analysis program. Gina's going to talk about this in just a second, but this is really designed specifically to fuel our experience optimization, testing and optimization program for US Cellular.
Yeah, so like Alex had mentioned, we introduced this concept of serial analysis, and we use this to help identify friction points, develop action plans, and then implement changes through our processes. And you can think of this as a TV series, and we break it out into different episodes. So whatever the cadence is, every 2 weeks, we sit down with Merkle and we'll decide what is the topic that we want to discuss. We'll determine a series of questions, and based on those questions, we'll perform an analysis, and we'll sit down with a smaller group within the digital team to kind of go over what are the results from this analysis. And based on the analysis that we come up with, it could feed into the EXO program that Alex was mentioning. But as you can imagine, all of these sessions that we're having, they are leading into very rich conversations amongst our team. But based on all of the discussions that we're having, it's also feeding into more complex analysis that we need to do, which then feeds into more tools that we need to learn. And in order to build on like our skills that Alex was mentioning, we also started incorporating trainings within our team. So on a weekly basis, we'll sit down with Merkel and determine what is the topic that we want to discuss. And based on that topic, we'll have a 1 hour working session, like I had mentioned, on a weekly basis to talk about what is the concept. And then from there, we'll also have a homework assignment. So based on the slide here, you can see that we started very basic and we started to just understand what is Data Studio and how can we build our own dashboards within it. But then we also got very technical into laying out what is the foundation of Google Analytics so that we can understand and start to pull this data ourselves. Because like Alex had mentioned, we don't want all of the data sitting with Merkel, because then our team can also understand these learnings and put it to work ourselves so that we can do the analysis on our own.
So the program has been, what Gina shows here is just the 5 sessions, but the training has gone, far, far deeper from this. And what's really cool is they actually do the homework, which thank you for doing the homework, Gina, because it's really allowed us to do what I'm going to talk about now around our experience optimization program. And so why that training is so important is, the inputs to this program are really what make this the success that it is. And so if we have more people who are able to get into the data, more people who understand that data, it leads to richer conversations around that data, and then the ideas start to flow from there. So what we're looking at here, if we think about back what I talked about on the previous slide where I showed that pyramid. The pyramid, if you take that and just rotate it 90 degrees, that's the beginning of the measurement framework into the ongoing analysis. So your KPI alignment, your segmentation, everything else, going from there. Leading into the ongoing analysis, this is our serial analysis. We can have dashboards, we can have monthly reports, everything. All these really should be designed around telling the story that we need to tell with the data, but then also around figuring out, ultimately, what does that data mean and how are we going to do something with it? So the serial analysis program is really the bread and butter of this, as Gina was talking about. The cadence of that allows us to be very relevant and timely with the analysis. We can chunk the analysis down because it's only a week or 2 weeks in between the analysis. We can get deep into a certain topic, have a very, very lengthy, in-depth discussion about what it means, align on what we're going to do with it, and then get it in the backlog quick. Whereas if we were to stretch that out over a longer period of time, by the time we can have that conversation and figure out what it means, it's too late, it's meaningless, and so we're not going to be able to actually do anything with the data, which is what we're trying to ultimately, avoid here. So some of the things that come out of that serial analysis are going to go directly into this optimization cycle in terms of what we call experience optimization. This will also be known as CRO. Other things we're just going to put directly into production. We're not necessarily going to go and run them through a testing program. Others are going to be larger ideas that need to be scoped out as projects or anything else like that. So there's a bunch of different ways that we're going to go and run optimization. But in terms of our actual CRO experience optimization program, this is what that starts to look like for us. So your ongoing analysis should lead into your testing and backlog grooming. What this is all around is scoring and understanding within each of those ideas which has the potential to go and actually make an impact for us. Some of them aren't going to necessarily do much. Others, there's going to be quite a bit of potential for. So we're scoring in terms of the actual KPI lift. We're scoring and understanding what the actual potential learnings could be from that. And then we're also looking at level of effort in terms of implementation. Can we do it in a testing optimization tool? Do we have to get front end dev or back end dev or others involved? And all that factors into what we're going to go and actually run as a test. Test development is highly collaborative across the different teams here. It's not like one team can do this. There are so many different people and processes that have to touch within that, and we've got to get it within our code deployment process and everything else like that. So there's a whole lot of governance that has to go in around that. Once you start to get to the apex of that curve and then you start to accelerate coming out of it, that's when things get really, really fun. Where you have multiple tests live, you're running them, you're monitoring them, you're seeing what's working, you're seeing what's not working, and we're making calls on, hey, we're going to pause this test, we're going to push it into production, we're going to do other things like that. And then the critical part of this whole thing is going to be your actual distribution of learning. So a CRO program, an experience optimization program, yes, it's around finding lift and improvement in KPIs, but really the goal of this program is around learning and understanding what works, what doesn't, and building that culture of experimentation and culture of optimization, because that leads to the bigger gains down the road. So once we get into that whole thing, you get into your basic rinse, repeat, and scale. And so what we've seen over time is the different aspects of our program, the different aspects of that kind of 2-axis chart are really all starting to come together to drive this forward for us. And when we start to look at the results, they almost speak for themselves.
Yeah, so like Alex had mentioned, based on everything that we have discussed so far, we also have the results to prove it. So we have made massive strides within all of our digital platforms, and some of the biggest improvements that we've had are related to our app score, our app store ratings, our app transactions, and also our plan changes. And all of this work has been achievable based on the data that we're able to look into to make positive business decisions. And at the end of the day, as we were mentioning in the beginning of the call, the collaboration among our organization has been the strongest that it's ever been. And all these ideas lead to a better culture, data centric organization, which also leads to positive business results. And we're very excited to see what we can do in 2023.
So when you think about how you put this whole thing together, there's a lot of different pieces to it. But the point is that cultural change doesn't just happen with some dashboards. It doesn't just happen with some data. There's got to be a bunch of different pieces to it. So thinking back to that rainbow chart, there's the governance aspect, there's your data, there's the actual program that you're putting in place. But really, when you're building this out, it's a lot of it is around how do you have discussions with the different team members to understand what the data means, and then how do you take those discussions and then put them into action. And so that's what we've been fine-tuning over the last couple of years, and we're really excited about the results that we're seeing now. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope that you've seen that analytics is way more than just your numbers. It's way more than just your dashboards. The real ROI comes from the culture of change and improvement and experimentation that it helps us drive. We hope you enjoyed the session. You've got some great ideas on how you can take this back to your own teams. And thanks again for joining us.